Well, welcome to Isaiah Lesson 16. After last week's history lesson, we moved to chapter 40 of Isaiah. So in chapter 40, we are flashing forward. Isaiah is talking about the future pertaining to the Babylonian captivity and then what happens after the captivity. Isaiah 40 says, "Comfort, yes, comfort my people, says your God. Speak comfort to Jerusalem and cry out to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, for she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins." In the first portion of Isaiah, we have the judgment scene where God calls Israel into court, accuses Israel of unfaithfulness. Witnesses come forward and testify, and God finds Judah and Jerusalem guilty of unfaithfulness and sends them into exile. Now they're coming back. The price has been paid. The Babylonian captivity that Isaiah foreshadowed is now over. And I can understand why there are those who say that from a textual perspective, Isaiah chapter 40 through 66 must have been written after the return from Babylon, because that's what it's talking about, 40 through 66. And when does that happen? It's 150 years after Isaiah. So you can understand why there are scholars that split Isaiah up into three sections and claim that chapters 40 through 66 were written at a much later date by someone else. We talked a little bit about this in our introduction, but we are looking at Isaiah as one complete literary work. So we have in chapter 40, Judah has now served its time at 70 years. Israel has served its time in captivity. It's been paid for, and now is a time for a new start, a new beginning. Comfort my people. Your hard service has been completed. Then verse 3, a voice of one calling in the desert, prepare a way for the Lord. Make straight in the wilderness a highway for our God. For every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain. The glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all mankind together will see it. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. The voice said, cry out. And I said, what shall I cry out? All men are like grass, and all their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers, the flowers fall, because the breath of the Lord blows on them. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God stands forever. People will come, people will go, but God's word will stand. You bring good tidings to Zion. Go up on high mountain. You bring good tidings to Jerusalem. Lift up your voices with a shout. Lift it up. Don't be afraid. Say to the towns of Judah, here is your God. Look, the sovereign Lord comes with power, and his arm rules for him. His reward is with it, and his recompense accompanies him. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, or with the breath of his hand marked off the heavens? Who has held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains on a scale and the hills in a balance? Who has understood the mind of the Lord, or instructed him as his counselor? Whom did the Lord consult to enlighten him? Who taught him the right way? Who was it that taught him knowledge, or showed him the path of understanding? Who could have done that? Well, the answer is no one. There is no other God. And here, what we've seen introduced in the first part of Isaiah, of God being the only God in the whole universe, we're really driving this home in this last portion of Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 15. Surely the nations are like a drop in the bucket. Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, all this history that we have talked about and studied as we made our way through the Bible, these were magnificent empires. The Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire. But what are they today? They are something we read about a long time ago. All those nations, all those powerful kings, all those events of the past are like a drop in a bucket. They are regarded as dust on the scales. He, God, weighs them on the scale. Look, he lifts up the isles as a very little thing. And Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor its beasts sufficient for a burnt offering. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted by him less than nothing and worthless. Think for all these kingdoms, and on through history, right up into our own time, all these nations that were top dog, all these nations that ruled the world, in God's eyes, they are less than nothing. They come, they go. Every world power has risen to a point of world power and have declined from some point and been replaced by somebody else. And all of that, 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000 years, all will be nothing. Let's go on to verse 18. To whom then will you compare God? What image will you compare him to? Look at the enormity of God created here in chapter 40. God who measured the sea in the hollow of his hand, with the span of his hand marked off the heavens, held the dust of the earth in a basket, weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in the balance. All the nations of history are no more than dust on those scales, simply to be blown away. That position is God in juxtaposition to what we think is important. Isaiah lets us know that God is overwhelming and so huge and of such magnitude that all the rest of us are nothing in comparison. To whom can you compare God? In verse 18. As for an idol, here in verse 19, a craftsman cast it, a goldsmith overlays it with gold and fashions silver chains for it. A man too poor to present such an offering selects wood that will not rot, a nice hard wood. He looks for a skilled craftsman to set up an idol that will not topple over. But do you not know? Have you not been told? From the beginning, have you not understood? Since the very earth was formed, God sits enthroned above the circles of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. He brings the princes to nothing. He makes the judges of the earth useless. No sooner are they planted, no sooner are they sown, no sooner do they take root in the ground, but he blows on them and they wither, and a whirlwind sweeps some away like chaff. All these great rulers, all the way back to Tiglath-Pileser III, to Sennacherib, to Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus the Great, the king of Persia, Alexander the Great, king of Greece, Caesar Augustus, and all the way down into our own times, all these people of huge importance in our world and in our context, God simply blows on them, and a whirlwind blows them away, and they are swept away like chaff. To whom then will you liken me, or to whom shall I be equal, says the Holy One. In verse 26, lift up your eyes on high, and see who has created these things, who brings out the starry host by number. He calls them all by name, by the greatness of his might and the strength of his power. Not one is missing. Think of the universe and deep heaven and all the stars infinitely stretching out into the universe. Who created all this? Who knows each one of those stars by name? Who knows? But not a single one is missing. They are all where they are supposed to be. Let's move on to verse 27. So why do you say, O Jacob, and complain, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my cause is disregarded by my God? You mean to tell me the God who could do all of this in comparison to empires and emperors who are nothing has a problem knowing what you need? Verse 28. Do you not know, have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even the young grow tired. Young men stumble and fall, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Wow. This is vastly different from the judgment chapters in chapters 1 through 35. This God who is so awesome and huge and powerful, he has chosen you to be his people, and he knows every thought in your mind, every corner of your heart. If you trust in him, and goodness, given everything he's done, how could you not trust him? And if you do, there will be hope. He will renew your strength. You'll soar on wings like eagles and run and not grow weary. Well, I want to stop here today, and we'll continue on in chapters 41 next week. But isn't this good news as we went through Isaiah here and saw all the negative things, the trial in the first part of Isaiah, then the historical interlude that just did not look good, future did not look bright. And then we pause, and God then speaks grace into these terrible moments that come in history. And I trust that God can speak into the terrible moments of our story as well. So let's receive this grace that he's going to talk to us about here in 40 on, and just go strengthened in his mind. God is bigger than all the things that are going on in our world today. Well, go in peace, and we will see you next week. Bye now.